This is the Ancient and Medieval History Lecture for Thursday, the 9th of December, 2021. And we have been talking about the 50-year golden age that Athens experienced after the victory that they and Sparta earned in the Greco-Persian Wars. That 50-year period is dominated by the general Pericles, who from 461 BC to 429 BC is the overwhelmingly dominant personality in Athenian politics. So there's an irony that during the apogee of the world's greatest direct democracy, one man dominates politics. But it is what it is. Pericles is responsible for the construction of the Parthenon, the Acropolis, which are the high city temple regions that inspire Athenians with the greatness of their city. He is responsible for constructing the long walls of Athens, which are going to serve as a snorkel through which the Athenians can have access to the sea and breathe in their wealth and power and breathe out their wealth and power. Despite being besieged. Athens versus Sparta. Well, let's look at Sparta. First of all, the history of the Peloponnesian War is a very different fellow from the historian of the Persian Wars. Herodotus, the historian of the Persian Wars, was a person who interviewed people widely from all over the world, and he took in culture and myths and legends and told all sorts of things that he didn't personally experience. But Herodotus did not remain satisfied that the gods did it. He looked for human causes to human matters. Thucydides, who's going to be the great historian of the Peloponnesian War, is an Athenian general who is given responsibility for the city of Amphipolis, which is up here. Amphipolis. And in Amphipolis, Thucydides will experience defeat at the hands of the Spartans. So this disgraced general goes home and becomes a historian. But what Thucydides writes is what he himself saw, or what he himself was contemporary to, where he could talk to many witnesses. Herodotus' history has been compared to a complex wine or brandy, with all sorts of subtle flavors and tastes. Thucydides to a cold glass of ice water. Clear, crisp, unadorned, but filled with what you need, which is water. So let's look at how this develops. And unfortunately, I didn't get to write all this on the board before you guys got here. So we're going to do some of it from the board, and that's pretty much review, and some of it from our notes, which hopefully you have. So we start out, the Peloponnesian War is going to be from 431 to 404 BC, which is a 27-year war. 27 years ago. Let's see. So that would be 1994. In 1994, Bill Clinton had been president for 2 years. We had recently conquered, driven the Iraqis out of Kuwait. The Republican Party took over Congress. It's a long time ago. Imagine being at war since then, from 1994 to 2021. It's a long war. And in a war like that is so long, it's going to have profound effects. Is that right? 2004, 2014? Yeah. 27 years. So understand that unlike the Greco-Persian Wars, which were, if you count the Ionian Revolt, a three-step process, but each war was very brief. We're talking a year or two. This is a slog. This is a long twilight struggle. Very, very difficult on everyone. So, okay. We've talked a lot about Sparta, but I'm going to remind you. Sparta is the exception geographically to the rest of Greece. It exists in a large valley. Sparta is therefore different on a basic level from the other Greek states. Sparta originally inhabited the valley that it's in with several other cities. But it conquered those cities, and instead of ruling them from afar, it destroyed them and turned their population into a perpetual slave class called the helots. At various times, there were 20 slaves for every Spartan, or 7 slaves for every Spartan. That's a lot of slaves for every Spartan. And that meant that all the work in Sparta was done by slaves, all of the blacksmithery and carpentry and pottery and winemaking and cheesemaking and bread making and farming and carriage driving, all this stuff was done by slaves. So what did the people do? Well, the people fought, and they trained to fight. The average Spartan woman was left in charge of the business or the farm, and she had to be able to reliably kill any of her male slaves at any moment, which is not normally an easy thing for a woman to do, the average woman, the average man. But Spartan women were trained to do that, and they were dangerous. The men left home at age 7. 7-year-old man. Boy. Mom's last statement to her baby boy before he goes off and becomes a soldier at age 7 is, come home with your shield or on it. In other words, come home victorious or come home dead. That's hardcore. That's mother love in Sparta. And from age 7 through the late 30s, Spartan men spent most of their time with the other men in the barracks. They would train, they would fight, and they are ready most of all to fight their own slaves. Because every so often human slaves will rebel, and the Spartans have to be strong enough to crush them, and crush them in such a definitive way that for the next 50, 75, 100 years the slaves won't revolt again, because they'll realize it's doomed to failure. The Spartans trained to be completely effective warriors. And that means that they apply principles that today we would call Darwinian. For example, if there are a dozen Spartan boys, they'll provide food for 8, and not much. 8 rations for 8 people, 12 boys. So what's going to happen? Well, number one, the boys are going to fight for the food, desperately, because otherwise they'll starve. This happens in litters of animals like cats and dogs, and other animals. Sometimes you have a runt, and that runt doesn't ever get enough milk, and unless somebody intervenes, that runt will probably wither and die because the others are preventing it from feeding. The Spartans believed that only the strong should survive. In fact, at birth, they winnow out anyone that seems to have birth defects and toss them on a hillside. In Sparta, the expectation is that all men are going to be warriors, period. And that all women are going to be worthy wives, mothers, and daughters of warriors. But this is all about the slaves. All about the slaves. Now, let's compare Sparta with Athens. Sparta, the great lion of the land, is an agrarian society oriented towards farming, is a military-oriented society. Sparta is a society that is practical. They're not so interested in theory. And Sparta has an association of allies called the Peloponnesian League, which is an alliance to protect the southern area of Greece called the Peloponnesus, which is today called Morea, from the Athenians and their allies. So Sparta is land-oriented. Athens is sea-oriented. Athens has its navy, the Delian League, and then the Athenian Empire. Athens is not agrarian. It has its farms, but it's a mercantile society. In other words, it's oriented to trade. Spartans are inward-looking because Spartans' greatest threat and their greatest opportunity are their slaves. Understand what treasure is. Treasure is something that has innate value, like walking around with a pocket full of gold coins, pure gold. You walk around with a pocket full of gold coins, and there's a certain confidence that you're going to have that if bad things happen, you at least have a better chance than most to buy your way to safety. You got a treasure. That treasure is going to ease your life. You also have the never-ending task of defending that treasure. You're walking around with a pocket full of gold coins. Those gold coins are not yours except that you hold them. If somebody comes along with a stick, a knife, fists, or a gun and takes those gold coins from you, they're not yours anymore. They're theirs. So if you have a treasure, concomitant with that treasure is the duty to protect it, the never-ending task of fighting to keep it, which is going to make you worried, paranoid, watching the world around you for potential threats because you have treasure. Freedom is like that. A French resistance fighter in World War II, an organization known as the Maquis, which was armed, trained, and directed from Britain by the British Secret Service. An organization that included French communists, socialists, and other Frenchmen who were conservatives or moderates who hated the fact that Germany was occupying their land. This Maquis fighter had fought without a uniform, without the protection of international law. He had fought Nazis by killing them, by trapping them, by robbing them, hit and run attacks, bomb attacks, terrorism, but in a good cause. And after the war, the Maquis fighter, or maybe during the war, the Maquis fighter was asked, what's it all about? And the fighter says, freedom. It's impossible to appreciate freedom until you've lost it. Freedom is one of those things. I understand. You're American students. You've heard about freedom and what that flag represents since you were little. It's just words for most of you. Most of you may not even know somebody who served in combat or who serves in the military. Some of you do. Many of you don't. Freedom is just a word. That's not bad. It's normal for people your age. I promise you, if we ever go through a convulsion as a country and that freedom goes away, you'll notice. All the nice words about it mattering what you think won't really matter anymore. What will matter is how you obey, how well and completely you obey, how quickly and unconsciously you obey the new masters. You won't have luxuries. You might not have necessities. You won't have choices. And you'll be so desperate because of that that you might sleep with the enemy, trade with the enemy, and betray your fellow countrymen to the enemy. This sort of thing always happens in war and in conquest. people turn on their own kind, their own country. And you will wonder how you ever took this thing called freedom for granted. It's like health. You don't appreciate your health if it's good. I didn't appreciate my health until I spent 3.5 straight days in agony with a massive triple or double ear infection. Finally, I got a hold of a drug strong enough to control the pain, and my doctor gave me advice, and the fever broke. Pain is something I never appreciated. I mean, pain, I'd experienced pain like anyone, ow, it goes away. This didn't go away. And this wasn't a minor ow. Your ears are very sensitive. You experience that kind of pain for day after day. There is nothing in life more pleasurable than the cessation of an ongoing pain. So freedom is a treasure. You've got it. And there are people, organizations trying to take that from you because it's precious. And they can use it. How can somebody use your freedom? By turning you into a slave of their ideas, by turning you into a mind-numbed robot, by turning you into a zealot, a true believer, by taking the individual that is you and persuading you that they are the source of wisdom. And then you're not you anymore, you're theirs. And what you wanted to do in life matters less than what they want you to do. So, the Spartans had their slaves, the Athenians had their democracy, the Spartans were inward looking. The Athenians looked out to the world because they were seafaring, because they were mercantile. They needed to find new markets, new colonies, new trade, new products. Spartans are militaristic. The Athenians are philosophical. And the Athenians have the Delian League, which becomes the Athenian Empire. So, what we see are two city-states in Greece that are so different from one another. They have really nothing to fight about. They have no more to fight about than a lion and a tiger shark. What do lions and tiger sharks fight over? The answer is nothing. They don't meet one another. I mean, look, you might be on the east coast of Africa and there's a lion walking along the beach, and swimming along the beach is a tiger shark. That's possible. But it would take a weird circumstance, maybe a whale beaching itself like they do sometimes. It's like whales commit suicide. They beach themselves and they're stuck there, and they keep, maybe the tiger shark can go to its submerged tail and start chomping on it, and the lion can go on its upper body and start chomping on it, and they meet somewhere in the middle. That's possible, I suppose. You can make a cartoon about it. Nom, nom, nom. Brrr. I mean, it's an unlikely thing. But every single war, everyone, is fought for one reason in addition to others. Some wars are fought for oil, some wars are fought for conquest, some wars are fought to fight against conquest. There's all sorts of reasons for war, but there's always this reason included every time. No exceptions. And that's an extreme thing to say. No exceptions. No exceptions. Here's the reason Athens and Sparta go to war. The real reason. Right now, we are as strong in our domain as they are in theirs. Right now, we're untakeable in our domain as they are in theirs. Right now, there's a balance. But what about the future? Will they keep growing in power in their domain? Will they begin to grow in power in ours? Will our grandchildren be faced with An enemy so great and powerful that there is nothing they can do but surrender or suicide? I think not. We and they are both strong. And sooner or later, we're going to fight. If that is taken for granted, if it is assumed that because we are strong and they are strong and we are proud and they are proud, that we will fight, then let's not wait until they may be stronger than us. Let's fight now while we've got the military to do it, to have a fighting chance of winning. Do you see what's going on there? The Athenians and the Spartans both, I'll turn the heat up slightly. The Athenians and the Spartans both are proud and happy of their power. They're afraid that in the future that power might be eclipsed by the other side. And what do you do to answer that fear? Is there an answer to that fear? Oh, it'll be all right. It's not persuasive. It's not going to be all right. Not necessarily. I mean, it might be all right. Then again, we might be completely up the creek without any kind of paddle. What do we do? If war is inevitable, then let's fight now while we have the strength to have a good chance of winning. That's what the war really is about. Now, the pretext for the war is an island north of Ithaca, an island city-state called Corcyra. 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 There is a video based on, hold on, let me do this. The writings of Thucydides that trace the beginning of this Peloponnesian War. Actually, it goes further. I'll come back after this. And if you pull the shades open, that would be great. The history of Thucydides is a history of speeches. Thucydides recreates in speech form the motivations of the various participants. Pericles said a lot of what you saw the actor Ben Kingsley, who played Pericles, saying. In fact, you should have recognized some of what he said from his funeral oration. Athens is an education to Greece. We are the school of all Greece. Corinth is here at the Isthmus of Corinth. Corinth had colonized Corcyra. Corcyrans revolted. They asked Athens for help. Athens helped them, and they lost. Corcyrans lost. The Corinthians won. Sparta, an ally of Corinth, was being asked by Corinth to take reprisals against Athens. The Athenians said, let's arbitrate. Both sides didn't really care about Corcyra. They cared about the future. If we don't fight now, what will happen? So both sides went to war. Now let's look at some areas where this could happen today. And as the Spartan king said, war is a natural state, though men more often talk of peace. War happens. I've lived in a remarkably peaceful time, in what's called the Pax Americana, the Great Peace after World War II, which is still going on. There have been minor wars and mid-sized wars, but no great wars. No wars between major nations, not since World War II, not since 1945. And that war was our worst in human history. 20 years before, what had been previously the worst war in human history, the First World War, had played out. Since 1945, at first the United States and the Soviet Union contended in a Cold War as to whether freedom or communism would rule the world. Head up, please. Freedom won in and around the time this film was made, in 1991. But there are still wars. The war in Afghanistan was a small-scale war, but it lasted a long time. Didn't end well. Iraq, the first Gulf War, wars in Yugoslavia. But there are a few places on Earth where war could break out between major powers again. And this is a world that has nuclear weapons, hydrogen bombs, poison gas, super germs, atomic weapons that could cause electromagnetic pulses that would destroy the power grid for years. A world of over 6 billion people, dependent upon a complex system of trade developed after World War II. If all of that goes into the wood chipper because of a war, we could be looking at death we've never experienced before, on a scale we've never experienced before. The death not of hundreds of thousands or of millions or tens of millions, but of billions. If things went really bad, we could lose the human race, we could lose the ecosystem, we could lose the earth. Everything. On the other hand, we don't want to live in a world dominated by dictators and tyrants. So, in the Middle East, while many Arabs and Muslims have recently been willing to deal with Israel in peace, the Iranians are ruled by Muslim priests, clerics, imams, who have said that their prophecies of the coming of their Messiah can be hastened by purging Israel with God's holy fire. And the Iranians have been developing atomic weapons for decades. Any country with atomic weapons that talks glowingly about purging a country with holy fire might be willing to use atomic weapons. The last time that happened was Nagasaki in 1945, and that was a fairly small bomb by modern standards. So, an Iranian attack on Israel could launch a general war. The Ukraine is the region north of the Black Sea. It is Slavic but not Russian. Throughout much of its history, it's been ruled from Russia, though, as part of the Russian Empire or the Soviet Union. But after the fall of the Soviets, the Ukraine was an independent country. 10 years ago, the Russians took over the Crimea, Ukrainian territory. The world watched and did nothing. Since then, the eastern area of the Ukraine has been under Russian threat, even Russian attack. The rest of the world has done nothing. Right now, the Russians seem to be massing, sensing our weakness. And if they conquer the entire Ukraine, that could trigger a general war because the rest of Europe and the United States are in an alliance called NATO. And a successful Russian attack on the Ukraine could mean that the Russians become emboldened to take Belarus, Latvia, Lithuania, Estonia, Finland, Poland, to try to rebuild their empire. We don't want that to happen. So an attack in the eastern Ukraine might provoke war, it might not, but it's a step towards it. The most dangerous place in the world right now is the island of Taiwan off the coast of China. Taiwan had been culturally and ethnically Chinese, but the Japanese took it over in 1894 from the Chinese Empire. When Japan lost World War II, it was part of the Republic of China, which was China not run by communists, for 4 years, from 1945 to 1949. But during those 4 years, with the help of the Russians, Chinese communists took over mainland China. The government of the Republic of China fled to Taiwan, and since then, Taiwan has been free China. China today wants Taiwan. One of the stars on China's flag represents Taiwan. Chinese military has flown not airstrikes, but aircraft repeatedly into Taiwanese airspace to try to wear out Taiwan's defenses. Just taking off and flying in a jet plane wears the engine out. And Taiwan does not have infinite resources. Plus, the Chinese government has said that we will recapture Taiwan by reason or by force soon. While we don't have a formal defense alliance with Taiwan, we do have implicit promises, so do the Japanese, so do others in the area. Plus, no one wants China to start going empire building. If the Chinese attack Taiwan, it is entirely possible, and it may even be right, that's a matter of opinion, that we go to war. Boy, I hope none of that happens. I'm not trying to scare you, I'm just trying to let you know this war thing is a universal human issue. We'll talk about the Peloponnesian War tomorrow. Thank you. Good day. Oh, for those of you at home, the video is available on YouTube that we watched. It's called The War That Never Ends. It's by PBS, and it was produced in 1991, just before the First Persian Gulf War. And it has speeches from Thucydides relating to the beginning and course of the Peloponnesian War. Thank you.